Hello again, average moviegoers. Today we're talking about Eternity and whether it's a movie that will live on eternally or be forgotten. Eternity is directed by David Freyne, or Freyne. I probably should have looked up how to say that before, but he's previously known for his romantic comedy Dating Amber, and he's now tackling another romantic comedy, this time in the spirit of classical Hollywood, that features a love triangle between Elizabeth Olsen, Miles Teller, and Callum Turner, with supporting roles by Divine Joy Randolph and John Early, whom I make a point to mention because they were honestly a delight and one of my favorite parts of the movie. For those unaware, the spoiler-free gist of Eternity is that Elizabeth Olsen's character Joan passes away and must choose to spend eternity with her first husband, who died in a war, or her second husband, who she built a whole life with. In the meantime, Divine and John's characters act as afterlife coordinators to help push these three toward deciding their eternal destiny. Let's cut straight to the chase. I really enjoyed this movie. I had a lot of fun with it. I laughed, I sniffled a little bit, and all that was with the deck stacked against the movie because I did not see it with my wife. The theater was empty except for me, and I had smuggled in some Panda Express to gorge on and hate myself. So I guess you could say the movie had its work cut out for it, yet I still had an amazing time with it. So we'll get to the actors, but I need to get this out at the beginning because the real star of this movie is the art direction and production design. The afterlife world that was created was so beautiful to look at and so immersive. It's like this mid-century with retro futuristic elements. So it's surreal, but kind of nostalgic. The color palette is lush and vibrant. And there's some really striking elements and set pieces that I just loved spending time in. There's like these street lamps in the middle of a forest. And for heaven's sakes, it just looks so pretty. A lot of the storytelling occurs in the production design. We get to see so many different expo-like advertisements for afterlives that are endlessly entertaining. While we're talking about beautiful things, the score was also so gorgeous, and I just loved hearing it anytime that it got to be showcased or highlighted. The humor in this film is sometimes subtle, other times it's more in your face, but in either case, I had a few belly laughs and some embarrassing cackles. Luckily, no one was there to judge me as my chow mein spilled between the seats, never to be found again. But I think that what makes this movie special is there are various types of humor. You have some funny sight gags, you have hidden jokes in the background of sets, you've got witty dialogue, sassy comebacks, millennial humor, boomer humor, some philosophical jokes, and so on. Yet it is able to balance all that with just a very heartfelt tone, with some pretty weighty themes. This balance between philosophical and emotional depth and this lighthearted humor and charm is frankly remarkable. So let's talk about the philosophical aspects of this movie, many of which are theological as well, just by the nature of the material, which I found fascinating, and I anticipate that many others will find fascinating because they're coming in with their own certainties and expectations for an afterlife based on their religious understanding. So the subject of God is briefly touched on, not in a very satisfying way, in my opinion. Hell is frequently mentioned as not existing. So there are some philosophical rabbit holes that the movie chooses not to really go down, which is a bummer, but it gave me enough of a prompt to be thinking about and engaging with on my own. Like the movie establishes its own rules and procedures for an afterlife, and sometimes those rules can seem so abstract and pointless and arbitrary without explanation or reason, which may be a criticism levied against the movie, but I found it to be thought-provoking about how other conceptions of the afterlife could seem similarly dogmatic and arbitrary. It's hard for me not to view this movie through a religious lens. It's infused through the text because it's an afterlife movie. However, if you're worried that it's overly religious or critical of religions, I wouldn't worry about that at all. It barely touches on the subject overtly. It mostly just provides a fertile ground for discussion and thought on the subject. In fact, part of why I loved this movie is because it chooses to focus on themes relating to interpersonal relationships and the human condition and psychology more than these kind of cerebral philosophical explorations. Eternity is about grief. It's about the stages of love, this kind of fiery butterflies in your stomach type of love versus ordinary imperfect love. So it talks about perfection and imperfection and perception about those things and regret and agency and moving on. I just found it to be a movie that's interested in a lot of the same things I'm interested in. And I hope that a lot of people would engage with this movie and its ideas in that same way. Let's briefly touch on performances. I thought the best performance was Miles Teller, who kind of brings the physicality and mannerisms of an older man, which is exactly what his character demands, as he is in fact an old man who finds himself back in his younger body. I remember watching him get off the train, and he did it as if he still has brittle bones. It was just enchanting to watch. Sometimes Elizabeth Olsen's performance felt a little bit too stage acty for me, but it was mostly towards the beginning where she was starting to ham it up and like obviously reacting to the fact that she's dead. But it starts to calm down, and as the movie's tone and homages and sensibilities kind of solidify, it started to warm up the performance for me. Callum Turner has to be a handsome, perfect man, and it's kind of hard for him not to do that. He's perfectly typecast, and he really understands his role in this movie. Like I said, Divine Joy Randolph was hilarious. I just loved having her on screen. I think she's so magnetic and so funny. She gets to have relationships that are unique with a lot of the characters in this movie, and I just think that it really worked. She's a great part of this movie. Now let's talk a little bit about why this isn't a perfect movie and why I don't care. Eternity takes a unique premise, but it does play into the conventions of the genre. There's definitely love triangles demanding to make a decision right now. There's like running through the airport to your recently realized love. But this doesn't bother me that much. Not every movie has to reinvent the wheel in genre conventions. I mean, they exist for a reason. They're effective. They're great story structure. So I just noticed that every once in a while it took me out of the uniqueness of the movie. But it only lasted a brief second, and then I was back to feeling emotional and crying a little bit because it's just really well executed. And I think it was just because I see this movie as so unique. I really do think it's special. So when I noticed some of these storytelling cliches, it just reminded me a little bit that this is a romantic comedy. I'll be pretty vague, but one example I have in mind, especially something that took me back tonally and felt disjointed from the rest of the movie, was the third act. There's kind of this climactic action sequence where things really felt like they shifted, like the music shifted, the energy shifted, and it felt like it didn't need to be in the movie. It was very Charlie Kaufman being John Malkovich, Eternal Sunshine, Thunderbolts, if you get what I'm saying. It kind of broke the spell for me for a second, as if the filmmakers were trying to have some kind of cool scene, but in order to do so, they had to heighten the stakes in a way that felt artificial. And weirdly enough, it also felt like it half committed as well. And I think part of why I felt this way is because in general, I felt like the movie was starting to drag its feet a little bit. The story could have used some tightening up in the second to third act transition. In some measure due to the fact that there's a moment in this movie that feels like a climax. It feels emotionally like we're reaching the end of the movie, and there's still quite a bit more movie to go after that. So I really like the moment that I'm referring to. I think it's a great moment, one of the best of the movie, but it structurally feels like the movie should resolve faster than it did after that point. And if it sounds like I'm being nitpicky, it's because I am. I was on board for this movie 97% of the time, and I only kind of lost the suspension of disbelief in brief moments here and there. I think many people will enjoy this movie. It's a love and romance movie, yes, but not the kind that your wife has to drag you to, because it's deeper than that. It's not about two people falling in love. It's about love itself and about life itself. And I just think it's a movie really worth seeing. I hope it doesn't go under many people's radars, but I fear that it will. I honestly want to keep talking about this movie, and I feel like I have more to say, but I'm just going to stop now because I don't want to spoil your experience by priming or suggesting to you how to think about this movie's depiction of the afterlife. I think every person could look at this movie introspectively and in a lens of how you view the afterlife. But of course, there's plenty to be enjoyed here if you don't want to engage with this movie philosophically or theologically. I just think you'll be missing out on some of the fun. That's it for me, you guys, and the movie Eternity. Let me know what you thought of the movie. If you're planning on seeing it, I urge you to do so. Don't wait for streaming. Go show those studios that you will show up for these kind of movies, this level of art direction. that you appreciate this emotional depth. As always, let me know where you think I'm a dumbass and where you agree. Keep it civil, back up your opinions, be respectful. Remember that art is subjective and emotional. Just keep a cool head if someone shares a different perspective than you. But as always, keep watching movies and keep being average.